Hi, my name is Gerhard Schwantner and welcome to Selling Power TV. Today we're in beautiful San Francisco with Noam Bihar. He is the Managing Director and CEO of the Sales Readiness Group.
Gerhard, thank you. Great to be back with you.
And Noam is the author of their book on High Impact Sales Manager. And there is an interesting chapter on managing the sales pipeline. Why is this so important to you?
I think that managing the sales pipeline is a key skill for managers. Today, if you think about the, pretty much consistent use in most organizations by CRM systems, and by learning how to manage an effective sales pipeline, what we're really looking for is the ability to produce accurate sales forecasts. And so I think it's a key skill that managers need to develop, and obviously when they present to upper management, they want to be as accurate as possible.
Isn't this ironic that this is still a challenge with CRM? Now, we had CRM now for 15 or 20 years, and that hasn't solved the problem.
I think in many ways CRM is a wonderful thing because it creates such intense visibility, and it also is just so robust in terms of the ability to track opportunities. For pipeline management, though, it can also be a liability. Think about it from the sales perspective. You have opportunities that you're working on. You know that you're supposed to enter every one of those opportunities into the CRM system. But the real issue is that salespeople have a much greater propensity to enter things into the CRM system than to take them out of the CRM system. So we have this thing that we call a bloated sales pipeline. And over time, when you start to look at all the different stages and all the different opportunities, particularly across say you have a team of 7 to 10 people, it can become a very overwhelming number. And as a result, which of these are really opportunities that have a high probability of closing, and which of these are opportunities that may be stagnant and not moving, or even not going to move forward at any time.
Yeah, what I like about the book is that you outline the steps of managing the pipeline. Can you walk us through that quickly?
Sure. I think there are 3 key steps. One is make sure that there's objective criteria for each stage of your sales process. So typically companies have a 5 or 6 stage sales process. Are there objective criteria? And those criteria need to be customer driven. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Second area is really to make sure that you've assigned reasonable probabilities that make sense. And the third area is to track velocity. So at what rate is an opportunity moving through the pipeline? And maybe even more importantly, at what rate is it moving through that particular stage?
Right. So let's talk about the probability. How do you define the probabilities?
So I think the best way to look at the probability is to go back and do a win-loss analysis, and then take a look and saying, from opportunities that were, let's say, in the needs identification stage, what has been your historical win rate? And I think that what we would find is that most default probabilities have been set too high. So you really want to look at each stage and say, based on opportunities that were in that stage, and eventually move to closed won, which is a term most CRM systems use, right. What was the actual probability? I think there's another issue, though, that comes even before the probability, and that's really what are the criteria for each stage, because if you have too many things in that stage and you assign a probability, again, you're going to come up with way too high a sales forecast.
So you have a probability for every stage.
There has to be a probability for each stage, and I think what's missing is also what are the exit criteria from each stage. I'm using the term exit criteria because they need to be customer driven. So when you think about your sales process, you might think about things you're going to do, but in terms of needs identification, as an example, just going back to the example we used before, the customer actions might be that the customer has agreed that there is a problem that needs to be solved, the customer has budget associated to solve that problem, and the customer wants to go to the next step with you. So what we often find is that the criteria are not objective, and so different salespeople will interpret different stages. Also, it's great for a coaching conversation. So, hey, if we're going over an opportunity, does it really meet these criteria?
Right. And then there's the final of the 3 steps, which is velocity. How do you define and measure velocity?
So there's the velocity of the overall opportunity, which is when you entered it in to when it's eventually closed won or closed lost, how many days. If you have a 6-month sales cycle, that could be 180 days. But in addition to that, what we find really important is how long has it stayed in a particular stage. So if it's staying in any single stage, let's say using a 6-month sales cycle for more than 60 days, it may be dormant. So what we advise our clients to do is to look at the pipeline, assign a reasonable probability each stage, assign clear objective criteria to each stage, and then assign a time frame for each stage. And if something exceeds the time frame, it should move not out of the pipeline per se, but to an inactive pipeline. And so you have to manage both your active pipeline and your inactive pipeline. And as soon as it moves back to the next stage, it then becomes active again.
Right.
So in summary, would say make sure there's objective criteria for each stage, make sure that you have reasonable probabilities associated with the stages, and then track your velocity within each stage.
That's what I like about the book. You give them a playbook for managing the forecasting process and end up with better forecasts.
Right, and I think that's going to reflect really well on the manager,
Right.
and it's obviously going to really reflect well on their organization.
Thank you, Norman. We are going to continue our conversation with Norman where we talk about motivating the sales force.